Hi, everyone. Welcome to Piercing the Veil. We had a special time today. We have a guest from the UK, Dominic Zenden, and he'll be talking about time travel, or we'll be talking about time travel together and experiences and stuff that we've heard and stories and very interesting stuff. So it's all about time. And we had to do a little adjusting for our time from the US to the UK today for I, I'm going to say special edition, but it's really not. It's just a normal show that we usually have with a great guest, but we're just earlier for the U.S. to help him out a little bit, so we don't have him up staying past midnight. So, saying that, welcome everybody in chat. I see you, and if you have any comments or questions, please put it in all caps so I can see it, and then I'll try to bring it up on screen, and me and Dominic will discuss it. And I'll just go ahead and bring Dominic up, and we'll get going. Welcome, Dominic.
Yeah, hi, Gerald. Nice to see you. Thanks for the invite. I'm good to be back.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back. And is this an interesting story or a subject that we picked? You know, time travel and time lapses and all that stuff. I really like that, and I know you really like it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject. I think that there's not enough talk about this sort of stuff on live podcasts. I think there's a lot of talk about other things, but this is one of those things that we all could have had experienced or all could experience. And even if you go into the the UFO or the UEP's experiences and the missing time, and I mean, time is such a wide subject that has got so many different connotations within the paranormal.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting subject. I mean, just to take it as far as a human being on this earth and man-made time, every time the second ticks, we're time traveling. We're not in the moment no more. We're in the future. Every second, every time I speak, it's a new moment.
That's very true. But it's always that equation about duration. See, because all time does is measure duration. And without time, you don't know how long you've been somewhere or how long something's going for. So it's always duration. And without duration, you have no time.
Yep, it's exactly. I mean, and I know you said you've listened to all kinds of radio programs. We were talking about Art Bell before we came on, and that's how I got into all this stuff. I mean, I always had a natural fascination with it growing up, Bigfoot books, UFO books, as a kid, or sci-fi movies and all that. But Art Bell really piqued my interest in all these subjects.
Yeah, Art Bell is for me a legend. He's a real somebody that I look up to, somebody that I've really enjoyed. It's like he's been a part of my life for so many years now. And even now, I listen back to the archives of Art Bell because the interest in the subjects that he actually talked about are so fascinating. And even if they're 20 years out of date, there is no time. Right. They are timeless, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah, they're very interesting stories. I mean, I spent many a nights, listening to it or having the radio on. Yeah, I wish he was still here.
Yeah, me too. I think he's one of these people that I think he will always be here. I think he will always be there. And if anybody who's watching or listening right now, they're interested, go and look him up. Because I'm sure that if you haven't come across him, you would really welcome listening to him and listening to some of the people that he interviews. So he's just an inspiration. If he'd have been around during podcast time, I'm sure that he would have actually had a very unique podcast as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's hard telling what stories he would be having because I always, like I said, we always tuned into him because we knew he was going to have a new guest or somebody very interesting telling their stories. Yeah. And all the subjects of the paranormal, UFO, cryptid, all that stuff. Yeah. And time travel. He talked a lot about time travel on his channel.
He did. He actually got time travelers to ring in, didn't he? So if you're from the future, phone in and tell me why you're actually phoning me and what time you're actually at. And I don't think he ever found a real one, did he? But I think a lot of people claim to be time travelers, which is one of those things that it just sort of makes him stand out, doesn't it, as a person that can actually do that. I think that the other thing that he used to do with time, he used to do everything about premonitions. He used to do a lot of premonitions, didn't he? And
Yes.
say, right, okay, on every new year, he used to ask people to ring in with their predictions for the year ahead. And he used to always ask people to give them premonitions that they had in dreams. And I think that was some of the most interesting radio that I listened to for quite a long time, when he started talking to people about what they believed the future to be. Because now, right, 20 years after he did those programs, we can listen to them, and we are the future. And
Right.
we've
Yeah,
got
exactly.
those interviews, and it's quite interesting to listen to how people perceive the future, isn't it?
Yeah, the interesting thing about that show and doing stuff like that, who knows? Maybe one of them was real that snuck in. Like you said, we have to go back through the archives and listen and see if any of that happened or any of that.
Well,
but the dimensional part of it, people time traveling, are they going through dimensions? Is it something different than that? I mean, sometimes I go one way, then I go another way. And
yeah, I think you can swap and turn quite a lot, can't you, within it? If anyone's listening and they've had an experience with a dream or a premonition, the best way to actually make it authentic is to write it down and post it to yourself. So don't keep it to yourself. If you have a glimpse of the future, or you see something about the future, write it down, stick it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and post it to yourself. And that way you've got evidence that you've actually had that premonition before it happens. So that's one thing. With time travel, well, there's so many different connotations about time travel, Gerald, because the time travel that we actually know of is a bit like this ad for this show with Back to the Future, about people going back in time, isn't it? And discovering bits and pieces about the past. But what if people can go forward and back? What if time is not a beginning and an end? It's a circle. And if it's a circle, we can transfix that circle and go anywhere within time. And let's face it, would you say that time ends? At some point, will it run out? Is it likely, or is it something that we just don't know what's going to happen?
Yeah, I have a hard time wrapping my head around it, because I'll start, like I said, I'll start leaning into like dimensional or different timelines, multi-dimensional, and it's like you start going through it and thinking about it, then it's like, no, maybe it's this or maybe it's that, and you hear somebody else talk about it, it's like, well, maybe that makes sense too.
Yeah, but you think how we perceive time. We look at time as 24 hours a day, don't we? And we look at it within divinations of 60. So 60 seconds, 60 minutes, 24 hours in a day. That's only because of the rotation around the sun. If you're on a different planet, time would pass differently. So they would have a totally different concept of time if they use time at all. And that's the thing that we're used to. We're used to actually looking at it from our perspective. But what if time travelers exist? How would they know where they're going to? How would they know where they're going from? And I actually was talking to someone recently, a man called Colin Andrews. I don't know if you ever come across him. He's a crop circle expert, somebody that looks at all the crop circles across the world. And here in Great Britain, we're lucky to have Wiltshire, and Wiltshire is really the capital of crop circles. There's more crop circles in Wiltshire per square meter, for whatever reason, than anywhere else in the world. And I'm sure that you're going to prove me wrong if anyone knows any differently. But the fact is, these crop circles, a theory behind them is they are timestamps for time travelers. So when a time traveler traverses across those paranoid and districts through life and goes through different dimensions, they look at these crop circles to know where they've landed. So they know what time zones and what continent, what year, what is the time in that particular place. And if you think about it, they're going to have some gauge, aren't they?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like crop circles too. I used to I used to go to the websites that had the UK crop circles all the time because, like you said, they're really prevalent over there compared to the US. We'd have some here, but not like over in the UK and all that intricate design. And
Yeah.
if it's a message or if it's some kind, like you said, timestamp, I'd like to know how to read it and what is it saying?
Yeah, it's going to be something, isn't it? I mean, the theory could be because America is so big. America compared to England is vast. Yeah, I find it very hard to get my head around how far you have to travel to places and that you have to get on airplanes to go anywhere, whereas we get in a car just to go somewhere. Even Texas is so big, isn't it? The thing is, there's so much area to cover that I don't think you would get to see all the crop circles because, people just don't come across them, do they? You're not driving past them or you're flying over them. There's so much land in America that it would be hard to see everything. So I bet you a lot go unnoticed during the crop season. And so in England, see, they're all noticed because it's such a tiny country. That's why I believe that we actually get to see them all, because there's not a little, a blade of grass that we don't cover. Everything is used, and these crop fields, are very, very, very common amongst the countryside. But they need to be because we need to grow the food to maintain the country, and that's why I think we get to see them a lot. And maybe that they do actually transist across different dimensions, and maybe time travelers land in Wiltshire for whatever reason. I don't know. There's many occasions where I sort of think, why would they choose Wiltshire? Out of all the world, why would they come there? Why would they start on that particular level? And there may be a reason. There may be some sort of reason they can come and actually be anonymous. Maybe, maybe they can't, but maybe, some country like America or Australia or China or Russia, where it's so vast, if you were to go into one of those countries, you probably have quite a long distance between different locations, wouldn't you? Whereas with England, it's a shorter distance.
Right. Yeah, because just like you mentioned, Texas alone, takes forever to go across this Texas to get to another state. And then you have Alaska. Well, there's areas in Alaska I don't even think has ever been explored that we know of.
No, it's vast, isn't it? It's so vast. And Russia is only 26 miles away from Alaska, which is crazy, isn't it? It's just you don't think of that. You think Russia has been across the other side of the world, don't you? And 26 miles across the sea.
We had brought that up when we did our New Year's Eve special. We celebrated the time zones all the way and even to Alaska, right before. And we came across the fact that there's two islands, one owned by Russia and one owned by the U.S., and they're only 2 hours apart. But the timeline goes right between them, so it's actually almost like 24 hours in between them. But it's only 2 miles.
2 miles, right? And that really puts time into perspective, doesn't it? It shows it what a real it's an illusion, that something that we use to order our day, but it's not something that we should really set anything by. It's no sort of indication of anything, is it?
Right.
Yeah.
So we can wrap our heads around it. It's for obviously it's for man. It's a man-made system.
Well, the first thing that I remember getting into with time was alien abduction, when people talked about missing time. And I can remember reading about people that have been taken and they didn't know what time it was, or they were 4 or 5 hours late getting to an appointment, or the car had been stopped and they didn't realize that they're 2 hours out of the journey. That got me really interested to think, well, why would time be different? Why would time just be stopped? Why would it just be able to be manipulated in that way? And it's about being able to take out memories, isn't it? Take away people's thought pattern so they don't experience certain things. Well, we do that to ourselves every night when we go to sleep. We go to sleep for 8, 9 hours a night, and how much of that time do we remember?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Very little, do we? We sort of might get the remnants of a a last sort of minute dream or whatever, but we don't really remember the time zone. We wake up and go, gosh, is it that time already? Time has no relevance when we're sleeping. So does the soul have relevance to time? And it's very unlikely that it does. It's very likely that time has no relevance on the actual soul that we have within our bodies. And that's another thing that people, I hear people say to me, oh, I'm a really old soul, or I don't want to repeat this lifetime again, or I don't like the fact that, I'm going to come back. I like to finish, this life. I'm going to go and be a soul in the stratosphere of life. And I think, well, hang on, because time doesn't exist, the soul has got all that information about everything. Your soul should contain all the information. It should control all the stuff that you've learned and all the stuff you're going to learn. So if you can learn to access your soul, then that is a timeless encyclopedia about everything you've ever known in all your lifetimes. Now, you get your mind around that for a second, because that's a big thing to think, isn't it? That everything you've ever known and everything you're ever going to know is stored in your soul.
Yeah, the very essence of the human, your mind, soul, and body. I mean, it's all stored data there somewhere. It's just how do you access it, or how do you get to it? I mean, who knows what the possibilities or our capabilities are until we have full access to our soul, to our mind, and everything.
Well, do we learn to access it for the benefit, or do we learn to be able to understand it so we don't make wrong choices? It's one of those things that we're really sort of intrigued about, how time affects the choices that we make. Because what if, right, in this lifetime, we get things wrong? And I'm sure that most of us have, made mistakes or got things wrong. But we decide that when we sort of depart, our soul goes, we can repeat that lifetime. So we can fix those things. What about that within the way that we can repeat time, or repeat the same existence again and again and again? And I have a few stories about people that have experienced that time loop. And they've actually gone through a time loop, and they've found it very familiar. After the third or fourth passing through the loop, they start to get a little bit jittery because they're starting to recall some of the stuff that's going on. And one guy that I interviewed, a guy called Mike, who he reckons very, very clearly, he's an intelligent man with lots of real close thoughts about everything. He actually reckoned he died 6 times before he stopped the process.
Oh my.
And he went back to 0 and started all over again, and he went back until he avoided the situation that created his passing. Now, that to me was fascinating, because I, as a young man, I had a dream about being shot in the desert during the war. I was in a bunker, and someone came in the bunker and shot me. Now, I'm thinking about that, and it was long before I was in the military or anything like that. These dreams are really vivid, and I could see planes going down, and I could see lots of things happening, and it was set in somewhere like Iran or one of the desert states that we have in the Middle East. And I was in the military when the first Gulf War and then the second Gulf War ignited, but I was never sent. And that makes me wonder whether I avoided being shot because I wasn't sent to that location, because of that particular time loop was broken and circumstances changed. But I didn't do anything consciously to break it. It just happened to be the circumstance broke it for me. Whereas with Mike, he actually did something really quite, it was really, really funny to hear him talk about it. But what he did was, after the 5th time that he reckoned that he'd been through this loop, he programmed his MP3 player to play 2 songs, the same song, one after another. when something was going to happen. So what he did was he had this MP3 player with 1,000 tracks on, and his favorite song was All of My Love by Led Zeppelin. Well, that song never came up, right? It was very rare. And so what happened was, on this one evening when he was driving, and he was driving along the motorway, and there was this lorry in front of him, he actually got Led Zeppelin, All of My Love, come over his radio in his car. And he thought, wow, that's really good. I love that song. So he slowed down a little bit. But then out of 1,000 songs, it repeated.
Ah.
Can you imagine, right? It's his favorite song. It goes round once and he thinks, great, I'll just, slow down just to listen. Then it came on again and that got his attention, and he pulled over into the slow lane to actually see what was going on. And just as he pulled over, this lorry full of iron girders shed its load in the place where he should have been. And he reckoned he broke that time loop of his existence because he actually avoided the accident that had killed him 6 times previous.
Wow.
Now, that's the story, isn't it? I actually interviewed him for one of my books, and he was a really interesting guy to talk to. Just a normal guy, just a traveling salesman that used to go up and down the motorways in England. And he had this amazing sort of connection into past life and all the things that were going on within him. But his unique take was, it's your lifetime now. And he repeated the same lifetime until he could avoid a situation that took him out.
Wow. We had Danielle Diva on our show, and she's from Canada.
Okay.
And she told us a story on our interview of how they were in an RV going on a Canadian highway. I can't remember which highway it was. If it was, I'm not even going to say because I probably get it wrong. But they were traveling. And then pretty soon they noticed that the same cars that they had passed or she's passing again, or they're coming up beside her and going past them. And then they started noticing the same signs over and over. But it took them a long time to start noticing that. So it's almost the same kind of thing, but it was happening right now in their existence. Yeah. It's like they were in a loop where they couldn't get off the highway. No matter what they were doing, they just kept repeating and noticing the same cars.
Yeah. I've heard similar stories, and that one I would like to hear in its full entirety, because it would be quite a fascinating story of national parks in America where people go off in search of somewhere within the national park. Some sort of some part of it that's really sort of interesting, some hieroglyphs or something that's on the mountains, and they keep going round and round and round in circles, like they're caught in a time loop. And every time they think they're getting closer, they come back to the same sign. And that's quite a common occurrence for people in some of the bigger national parks. Apparently the Grand Canyon as well. There's quite a lot of stories of time loops and time situations around that part of the world, in that particular area, where people get caught in time slips, where they fall through time and find themselves in the past or in the future. And that's fascinating to me, that somebody could actually set out on their day and just fall through time. Can you imagine it? You go out to explore somewhere, you go out to the shops or go out to do your normal job, and you just find yourself 20 years in the past or 20 years in the future. How would you explain that?
Right. Like you said, there's lots of stories where people say it's a family or friends out on a hike on a trail in the national park or somewhere, and they either stop for a moment and they're busy doing whatever they're doing, getting a drink, getting something to snack on or whatever, and they turn around and their friend's gone, or one of their family members are gone. Yeah. Or the one person's ahead of the pack, and they're looking around enjoying the scenery, and then one person turns the corner to go around a tree or a bend. And then by the time the other people go there, the other person's gone. They're not in sight anywhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories about people on some of the mountains, like Mount Coot in California, where people go missing. And there's one guy, he went out there with his friends, and he decided to walk ahead of them by 20 minutes. And because for whatever reason, he walked off. and you can't disappear in 20 minutes because it's such a big plane. And his friends actually watched him go, then he just vanished into nothingness, and it's never been found. He's no part of him, no parts of his equipment, his rucksack, his clothing, his shoes. He just totally vanished into thin air. And if you know the areas, they're really quite large areas, but the actuality is that there was nothing to lift him off. He would have just slipped through either the earth or through time or through a time slip. And there may well be areas that are fractured in time that we're aware of, and that missing people actually come across before they go missing forever, and they never return. But where those people find themselves 20 years in the future, or they find themselves 100 years in the future, but even worse, they find themselves back 100 years, and they find themselves in the 1800s. Right. How are you gonna deal with that particular transition? And there's lots of people out there who've actually had people go missing, and they've actually traced them back and found some evidence that they've actually died 120 years previous. And so that sort of paradox is never talked about. We never ever discuss these people that have gone missing and that have marked graves back in time, because you think you take them out of the loop, their DNA isn't going to go on, is it? But it does, because they've actually had children in the future. So they could be their own great-great-grandparent, which is, a remarkable thing when you start to think about it. But it could mean that it's a very ordinary thing to happen, that a lot of people do go missing and they fall through time. I forgot when we talked about Alaska, Gerald, I forgot how many people go missing in Alaska every year, but there's quite a few. It's in the thousands from what I can remember. It's one of the people listening might know, but I think, it gets to be quite a high number, and people just don't go missing. They must go somewhere. It must happen to go somewhere, mustn't they? But, maybe we don't really understand these time slips like we should.
Yeah, because we have, everybody talks about the Bermuda Triangle, but we also have the Alaskan Triangle.
Yes.
So that's up there where planes are missing, boats are missing, people out there in the wilderness or, hiking in Alaska are missing when they enter that area. So, are they going through portals? Is it just a time slip? And like you said, do they go back in the past, or are they going into the future? I mean, if it's a portal, I've always wondered that, if you walk through a portal, are you going to another dimension? Are you going to another world? Are you going to Shangri-La? I mean, I'd hope I would go to Shangri-La. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I think that the string theory about everything being attached and everything being belonging to itself, and there being many people, there's maybe lots of you across different dimensions, so there's another version of you doing something totally different in another dimension. You multiply that by thousands or millions, and you get all the dimensional shifts that we could be anything, anywhere, at any time. It's just that our reality is in the now. This is our reality right now. This is the one that we're living. And that's quite an interesting thing to explore, especially when you start talking about walk-ins and walk-outs. When you start looking at things like doppelgangers and living ghosts and all that sort of stuff, you get to real interesting subjects about people that have been seen walking up and down their high street 20 years before they've walked up and down their own high street, or people that have seen themselves, and themselves have actually, one lady that I interviewed, she actually opened the door to herself, but herself was 20 years older, which is weird. And the only reason she recognized her was that she had the same ring on her finger. And that sort of thing really does make me start to think, well, hang on, we're in lots of different dimensional shifts that we can actually enter in and out of almost at will. And if we can do that, what's the, where can we go? What's the future of time travel, or what's the past of time travel? Can we actually interact with people, and are we interacting with people that we don't even know that they're born in our time? And that's before you even start looking at people that deliberately time travel.
Right. I heard a story the other day. I always listen like on YouTube or on the radio. If I catch a program, it talks about time slips, time lapses. And the one I heard the other day was a man and his wife were in bed and they were sleeping, and he woke up, just lightly woke up and saw the door to the bathroom cracked and water running. And he's like, that's weird. Why is that? And he checked, and his wife, or, the person's in bed right next to him. And then he hears a voice from the bathroom, and it's his wife talking to him like she's getting ready to brush her teeth and get ready to come into bed. But yet his wife is in bed with him right there that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a living ghost. That's what, when people talk about living ghosts, it's someone that's actually seen in a different place at a different time, doing something they would ordinarily do. I mean, you think about the amount of times you go into your bathroom, or you have been into your bathroom and, cleaned your teeth or done something, get ready for bed. Your routine is going to be the same pretty much most days. It's maybe different times. But think of all the imprints of you in there, all that energy of you in there doing that particular thing. What's to say that some sort of frequency or vibration of weather condition wouldn't release that? There's lots and lots of things that I believe are imprinted in the actual atmosphere. It comes into something called stone tape theory, that the actual atmosphere picks up an image of whatever's going on, and certain weather conditions release that image. So it's the reason why people see legions of Roman soldiers walking up the middle of the road when there's no road there. And it's like there's an imprint of all that energy at that moment going up that road, or why people see people on, a lot of ghosts are seen on roads. We get a lot of around this way, around where I live in Norfolk in England, we get a highwayman actually going along the road at certain times. And
right.
And it's only an imprint. It's not an actual, it's just a literally a picture, a photograph, or lots of images of watching this thing just go up and down the road. But it's imprinted into the atmosphere around there. So I think imprints are huge. I think they actually bring in so much energy and so much things that we don't even know about, that when we see something that's imprinted, we think it's real, when it's really just a video. And I think people see a lot of those sort of ghosts, those replay ghosts.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. Oh, yeah, because, I always think it's paranormal, where it's like an apparition or whatever. But yeah, an imprint in time.
Yeah.
I mean, that explains a lot, because people will see a ghost or whatever walk through your wall, or, they'll go through your living room and walk through a wall. Well, at the time they were living, maybe that wall wasn't there. Maybe that was their hallway or their dining room, and they're just walking across doing their everyday thing, and we're happen to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an imprint. It's not, you're just watching a video, if you like, or a replay of that situation reoccurring on the atmosphere. So, in things like walls, and if you ever work with psychometry and know that objects hold vibration and frequency, and if you hold a rock, what's to say that you can't feel something that's been on that rock before? That's why mountains must hold so many imprints, because there's so many things that they must experience over them, billions of years of being in existence. You think these old things, even something like a tree, you hold a tree, these trees have actually experienced and witnessed so much, and the imprints must be a part of their vibrational frequencies. So there is often things in nature that holds these keys to these vibrational frequencies that we claim to be paranormal. And I think it's just a normal phenomenon that we actually don't understand fully. And we tend to think it's maybe sentient, or it's alive, or it's something that is there in actuality when it's not. It's just a playback.
So imagine you talk about trees, and I just went into my head and thought about if people talk about the rings in trees when they cut them down.
Yeah.
So that's really a written record, not only of their environment, but what if you could actually play that back and see what was happening at the time? If you use that cutaway, that cross cut of a tree, and see the rings and play it like a record player or a video player, and actually see what was going on at that time and all those rings.
Wouldn't that be fascinating, just to have a record that wasn't tampered with, that wasn't somebody else's version, that was real? That would be brilliant. I mean, I think of that with the hieroglyphs, these paintings on rock faces and stuff. And you see all these little aliens all painted onto places in America and in Australia, where the Aborigines and where the Khotan Indians have actually put these pictures on these rocks for a reason. Can you imagine it if those rocks are holding all the imprints of the situations that they've actually witnessed, and those paintings are some way of being able to relate back to that particular vibration? It would be an amazing key to actually look at that particular period, even with the Egyptians and the pyramids. I mean, there's so much that we're denied, so much of our history that we don't even come close to knowing anything about. And it could well be already imprinted into the environment that we're living in. And it could take us back. We could go back through time just to experience it. And if time is a circle, we could go forward in time and experience that as well. So it's almost like we could actually predict whatever is going to happen, because we know it is going to happen because it's already happened. And people find that quite hard to get their mind around when you say, look, your future's already happened and you could well just be fulfilling that future. They say, well, how could we be? Because I make my own personal choices. But do you make your own personal choices? Are premonitions tied in to the personal choices that you're making? So in other words, does your body tell you that you've made something wrong and you have a dream about doing something wrong, but you still go ahead and do it anyway? And there's been lots of people throughout history that have had premonitions of doing something wrong, but they've still done it because they don't believe their dreams. And I'm sure that it's just fascinating when you start looking at time as an objective way of being able to understand who you are and what you're about. It becomes far more interesting to see that you may be able to understand why you're doing stuff, and you may be able to understand where you're going if you just stop and listen long enough.
Yeah, I was just trying to keep up with the chat, see if there was any questions or anything. But the other, we talked about it before. You bring up dreams, but the stories, or I've had this experience myself where I go to sleep, like take a nap or fall asleep at a different time of the day than I normally do. And you're in such a deep state. And then when you finally just waking up out of it, you're kind of in the shock. You don't know what time it is. You don't know what day it is anymore. It's like, what is your body going through when you're in such a deep sleep state like that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just mind blowing to think that time doesn't really exist, because there's nothing to actually gauge it by. The only things that we gauge is duration. And that comes back to this. If we don't have a duration of the planet going around the sun, how do we split out where time is? And it's all that sort of thing that we do to make it more convenient for our own world. But I wonder if there's other civilizations across the universe, which is going to be billions of civilizations. They found so much with the James Webb telescope that don't have time and aren't governed by time. So time doesn't even come into their equation. They found a different way. And because we're so doctrined into time, we don't know those different ways. And it's a big thing with me. I honestly think that we're taught what to do and what to believe and how to act and how to react to situations. And the only thing we're denied at this moment is comparisons. We're never allowed to see that there's other civilizations that have evolved like us in different ways. And it may well be why they hold back this information of intelligent life being across the universe. Because as soon as there's another civilization like us, we can compare our civilization to them. And we can see what they did within their civilization, whether they have religion, whether they have language, whether they have music, whether they have all the things that we actually have, whether they have ghosts or whether they have paranormal events. We have no comparison. At this moment in time, the earth sits by itself and we have nothing to compare it to. And I would think that would be fairly scary to people that were trying to teach us what to believe, to let us have comparisons to other civilizations that may well have a totally different way of going about the way that they act in life.
Yeah, because even dimensionally, just because the existence that we live here now in our mortal bodies on this plane, this Earth, doesn't mean that an Earth or a life-bearing planet or dimension is living the same as us. I mean, you see that all the time in the movies, the Marvel movies, the dimensionals and all that, where you have exact replicas of you, but they're all different. They all have different abilities. They're all living in some kind of bizarro world compared to ours.
Yeah, but we don't have anything to compare it to, do we? If I said to you, tell me about something like a ghost or a religious study or something about the way that we live our life in time, we only have what we have here, because nothing else is available for us to look at and go, this alien culture don't live in time. They live in this way, or they live in a different way. They have a different society to what we have. And we don't have anything that we can look at our society next to another intelligent society. So if there's a civilization out there that does things differently to what we do, we don't get to look at it because we're told they don't exist.
Right.
And that is such a shame, because we don't know whether we're being fed lots of things that aren't the truth. We're just being told what to do, how to live, how to run our lives, how that we live from the age of 1 on a straight linear line to when we get in our 80s, when we die. And when we die, well, it's still in question. Do we go to a different place? Do we go to a different dimension? Is there lots of different worlds that we actually inhabit, that we actually realize within our soul? Because no one's actually come out and said these things are possible. They're only speculation. And that's the biggest thing that we get denied, is the knowledge that may well exist within places like the Vatican, within governments, within places of real high intelligence like universities. That knowledge is denied us. We don't get a chance to actually go and access that knowledge. And I believe that knowledge belongs to everyone. It doesn't just belong to the people that discover it. It belongs to everyone in society that could be useful or use it in a useful manner. And just think what reincarnation would do if we actually discover reincarnation is real. It's beyond doubt. It's actually real. What would happen to our society? You never die, right? You just reincarnate. What would happen? Would you get lots of people going, right, I've had enough of this lifetime, I'm going to reincarnate into my next life? Yeah, what would be the impact? Because we're never allowed to actually know that knowledge is total.
Yeah. You talk about the Vatican and places, the information that's down there, like you said, that we are not allowed to access or read or find out. What is the truth that's in these books or these scriptures or scrolls that are down there? And then you got like Atlantis, they had that fantastic library there, or Alexandria library. What was in those scrolls? I mean, we'll never, in this experience, we'll never know.
Well, we've got the Copper Scrolls, haven't we? And the Dead Sea Scrolls that are being translated, which are really interesting to see how the societies worked and what was on them, because they're mainly scripture about rules and society and the way that society is run, and how their society is run has been denied to us. So even if Atlantis was the place that we believe it to be, we've been denied any knowledge of it because it may well have been a different civilization to the one that we are living in right now. It may have been structured in a totally different way. So it's just a myth. And even when you go into the Rendlesham case, when they believe that it was a time ship, time travelers that came down, they left that note in Pedersen's book all about High Brasilia, which is an island just off the the west coast of England that sunk. So there's lots of bits and pieces that we're never allowed. We're only given just a tiny touch, and we're never allowed to actually examine. I was watching somebody talk about the Egyptian society and how they used electricity to power everything in Egypt, and it's almost like denied to us. Tesla actually said that we can have free electricity out of the air. It's abundantly around us, and we can just tap into it. We've been denied that. We've not been allowed to explore that possibility. And Tesla was quietened. He was shut down, wasn't he? Really, and all his documents taken away. What is it that we're being denied within what we really could be living? We could be living a life without maybe finance, without doctrine. We could be having everything that we could ever want because there's enough on this planet to share it around everyone. But we're denied that by a few who want to actually rule the earth. And where do we go with that? It's I hope in time we actually learn those secrets, and that maybe there is things that are controlling us that shouldn't be controlling us, and that we would evolve past that control, so everyone can have whatever they want. Because really, strictly speaking, on this planet, we could have whatever we wanted. There's enough resources for everyone to have a comfortable life. It's just that there's a few that take everything. And that seems to be something that's been denied constantly. But whilst the rich maintain that wealth and they maintain their family lines through the wealth lines, then nobody's going to get near them because they control the media. So there's so much going on, and I don't want to sound like David Icke, but what I do want to sound like is that there's plenty for everyone if we were able to understand that everything is there for everyone, not just for a few.
Right, and that's how I feel. I know it's not happening in this world, this existence, but I'm imagining that somewhere in another dimension or another past life or future life or whatever it's going to be, that there's going to be, just like you said, that we're going to have world peace, and we're going to be able to have all our inhibitions, taken away from us, and we're going to have enough food, enough land, and be happy and be able to share everything. And there won't be any wants for anybody. There won't be any starving children. There won't be any the stuff that we go through that basically we put on ourselves because we have limitations put on us.
Absolutely, and that to me would be the idyllic world that we really would want to live in. And I think that wherever you go around the world, people like you and me, Gerald, are all the same. We all want that. It's only the few that don't want that, and they're the powerful few. I've always had this sort of dream that everyone works for nothing. Whatever job you do it for nothing. Right across the world, anyone, whatever job you're doing, you don't get paid, but you can have whatever you want. So take money out of the equation. Take all trades, all the things that we've been learned to need and to want and to use and to chase. Take that out of the equation. Everyone does their job for free. It just means that we could have whatever we wanted and people wouldn't need anything. Why don't we do it? I've never understood why we don't do that. Why don't we do that? Why doesn't everyone just go, right, okay, the world is a big place, loads of resources. We've got everybody trained in the jobs that they're doing. Everything is, able to be done. And so right now we stop. Nobody gets any money for doing anything. But if they want something, they can have it. It would just end poverty, wouldn't it? Straight away. It would just change the whole concept of our lives. And it would be much more joyful being able to live a life that you're comfortable in without feeling that you have to chase extremes. Because that's all we do. We just chase extremes. We chase numbers in bank accounts, and that don't really exist. And we chase those sort of levels of things that we probably don't need. And if everyone just did their job, then everyone could actually live quite happily together, have whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it'd almost be going back to the barter system where I provide a service that you need and you provide a service that I need or somebody else's needs, and we take care of each other.
Yeah, it's a big pass it on. It's basically pass it on. If you've got something and you can do something, you do that. I've got something that I can do, I do that. Everyone does whatever, within their life that they can do. And everyone then can be whatever they want and have whatever they want, because there's no price on anything. And those people that are making a killing out of, making loads of money out of selling stuff and becoming very, very rich and very, very powerful would lose that power. Politicians would lose their power overnight because everything would get done. Nobody would want anything, and our life would be so much simpler. It would simplify everything. The only people that would miss out are the rich and powerful.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, we really do that now for like our friends and family. Like if our family needs something, we give it to them. Or if we can make something for them, if we have a craft or a skill, then we do it and we freely give it to them.
Yeah.
Close friends, family. But then it's when you get out past your inner circle, I'm gonna call it an inner circle or close circle, then all these other rules and stipulations and somebody else, tries to charge you or what's your value for what you do.
I know. And it's the same. I mean, I do something called an aura photographic profile, which is a really in detail reading for a person. And I will often say to people, I'll just do it for you. Just do it for you. But I want you to do something for me in exchange. And some people go, yeah, okay, no problem. What can I do for you? And that's really good. And other people go, I can't do anything. I don't know what I can do. What can I do for you? What do you need that you haven't already got? And so, as soon as you start questioning it, it doesn't work. But as soon as you just go with it and let it go and let it flow, it really, really works. And I'm sure that your family is not the only family that do that across the world. I'm sure there's a lot of families out there that look after each other by helping each other without any restraints of having to pay back. I just think that if you can actually do something, you do it for somebody, and someone does something for you, it's an equal exchange. It's more than a barter, isn't it? It's an unconditional way of being able to live. I know a lot of people. I've got friends in Alaska. They're very into that sort of system of working because it works in their community. And I'm sure that it should work in other communities, but unfortunately, people just want to sell everything, don't they, for money? And they never really get anywhere with it. They just get rich. And what do? So you accumulate all this money. What do? You pass over. That money doesn't go with you. It goes down to your nephews and your family and the people that run the family, and they go and spend it. So what have you accumulated it for? Absolutely no reason at all. It just doesn't make sense, does it?
No. Yeah. So, well, it's almost like a Shangri-La. It's like a thing that we want. It's like something that we strive for, but we never achieve. So it's like if we could take those stories where we go through a portal or somebody enters a cave into a mountain, all of a sudden there's an inner world where everything's peaceful and lovely and a Shangri-La. Maybe that's why people don't come back.
Maybe that's what it is. I know Admiral Byrd reckoned that, didn't he, when he flew over the South Pole and discovered all that underground city full of advanced civilization that were living there. And they warned him never to go back. And they said, if you go back, then we won't let you leave again if you go back. And so he was really amazed by what he discovered and what he saw just through the South Pole. And that whole thing, can you imagine it? If we could expose that there is civilizations living underneath the earth, or living in cities that are there that have been built underwater or under different landmarks within the world that have been here longer than what we've been here, then time becomes really irrelevant, doesn't it? Because what we've got is we've only got our civilization, 2,000 years since Jesus. That's how we mark it, isn't it?
Right.
But how many years before that? How many centuries before Jesus? I mean, where is our timeline? Where do we look at our particular understanding? And then you go back and think, well, hang on, the dinosaurs are on this planet for 50 million years. 50 million years. Does that make sense? You think, these dinosaurs lived where you're now, right? Where you're talking to me from. They were walking along that land that you're living on for 50 million years. Now, that's crazy, isn't it? When you say it, it's so crazy. And it just means that there's a whole planet that we didn't know about before we came along. And what was there before they came along? Were there something else that were in the planet, before that? So we only get told a little bit about the history of our Earth, don't we? And I always think, well, how come we never see ghosts of dinosaurs? They were here a long time.
I've said that too.
Yeah. I always think, how come? But we should do. I know sometimes in Alaska there's a pterodactyl seen flying, and they reckon that takes people up. Can actually carry people away, this pterodactyl, and there are reports of that. But we don't see ghosts, do we? We don't see Segostauruses walking out along the high street where they once walked. Why is that? Why don't we get these imprints of these monsters, these great big cryptic animals that were walking amongst us? And were we there? Was man alive when dinosaurs were alive? Did we survive together, or did we just have separate existences? And do we only exist because they don't exist? There's so many questions we got to answer. So much, we don't know, and so much that doesn't fit when you start looking at time.
And it also makes me wonder, they always say that the dimensions are here. We're just not able to see them because of our light spectrum. Well, what if early back in time, let's say prehistoric, when the cavemen or whatever were starting to be developed or coming into existence, what if their eye receptors were totally different than us, that they could see this stuff, and gradually over our human existence that ability got narrower and thinner where we couldn't see no longer what is right next to us?
Well, I think that a lot, because I look at energy frequencies. I see colors from energy frequencies, and some people call it the aura, or some people call it just vibration of color, but I see them around people. So maybe there are skills that we've lost that are still buried in our own DNA that come up, occasionally, that allow us to see things that perhaps we've forgotten how to see. But it's a very true thing that we've forgotten how to be able to survive. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people in America very interested in the fact that we've become soft. We don't know how to survive, how to make our own foods, how to actually be dependent on electricity so much that if something doesn't work, we're absolutely we're really down the line, aren't we? We don't stand a chance. So if we don't get our cushy little central heated houses and go and get our food from the supermarkets, where does it come from? I think we've lost the ability to actually fend for ourselves. And that could well be the fact of our own fault, that we tried to make life too easy when it comes to providing. And that all comes down to money, doesn't it? People will do anything for you if you pay them. They'll do anything. If I said to somebody, can you come and do this for me? Oh, yeah, but it'll cost you. It'll be that much. Can you kill a chicken for my dinner? Oh, yeah, but you have to buy it from a supermarket. That'll cost you. Whereas when we were, first in that sort of period of time, we'd have to go out hunting, and if we didn't find a bird to eat or something, we had to go and forage, and all our time was taken up with just staying alive. Nowadays, our time isn't taken up with staying alive. Our time is taken up with trying to philosophize about how we became here in the first place. And I'm sure that will grow only bigger and bigger and bigger as we actually start to find that life is a lot easier. And I don't know, I think that in the future, maybe food will be scarce. We won't have the food that we have now and the resources that we have now, because the planet's getting more and more people on there. And at some point in the future, I think we'll have auctions for things like food online. So like a strawberry, because we've got no room to grow it. We were going to be sort of bidding on a strawberry because we've forgotten what a real strawberry's like. And stuff like that. So our future may be that we lose this, and food becomes a real highlight of everyone's day, and becomes really expensive, and we probably just live on nutritional supplements rather than real food, because we haven't got the capability of growing food for everyone. There's going to be a lot of changes, I think, as the future comes in, and a lot of the things that we're used to now won't apply.
That strikes me as the scene in Soylent Green with Charlton Heston, where all of a sudden they have these steaks, and they haven't had steaks in years. I said, what is that? Is that real cow? Is that beef? They hadn't had that.
No, it's going to be one of the things that I think will afflict the planet as we grow more and more, and we become more and more crowded within the planet. There's going to be less and less space to grow food, isn't there? And normally, right, if there's less space, there's less human beings. And so what happens is something happens to maybe take, a few of those human beings out. So there's enough for everyone. But with modern day medicine, we've got nothing that allows us to be cut back. Even the pandemic that spreads around the world, but we find a cure. And it's often the case. I quite often laugh at that and think, well, had the pandemic not affected rich people, do you think that we would have found an antidote so quick? If all the people in charge and all the rich people of the world have been immune to that particular virus or that particular strain, do you think that they would have found a cure so quickly? It's that sort of realization that they're very human, and that they're just as susceptible as the person on the lowest rung of the ladder. That's why the cure was found so quickly, wasn't it? Because it was that sort of susceptibility of all of us. We're all mortal. We all die. We all have that sort of time up sort of label across us.
Right.
But as soon as it becomes threatening to the people that have the control, they find something to actually antidote it. And that's what happened. An antidote was found within a year, wasn't it?
Yep.
All because it affected everyone, not just the poor. If it had just affected the poor, that wouldn't have been an antidote there.
And it makes me wonder, you were talking about resources being limited, whether it's food or whatever. Is that like a soft disclosure in like Star Trek where they have food replicators? So we're on a track right now where we're getting synthetic food, and we're seeing more and more of that trying to be introduced into our lifestyle. So maybe in the future we do have food replicators, so nobody's growing anything anymore. We're just manipulating the cells and the DNA of stuff to produce it ourselves.
Yeah, maybe that's probably part of it, isn't it? And they say science fiction is normally a part of science future, don't they? That once you start seeing the science fiction come out there and say about replicators and everything, there's a sort of a notion of truth behind it somewhere along the line where that will actually happen. So you look at it now with corn. Corn has become almost like the go-to product for vegetarians. And it can be made into any shape, any size. It can taste like anything, and it can be brought into the diet. It's a protein, rich nutrient that can actually be shown in any form you want. It can taste of anything. Aren't we close to replication there? Yeah. When we can provide the planet with a meat substitute, do we need herds of animals eating and producing methane gas? Do we need that anymore? Do we need these people that are eating beef when they can eat a beef substitute that's produced? Do we need that? It's a big question, isn't it? I don't know how the American public, 'cause I know the American public love their beef, don't they? Love their meat
Yes.
and stuff.
Yeah,
They're really.
I can't imagine having a steak and potatoes and anything that's that we grow our own or raise. I just can't get on board with synthetic foods. But maybe at one point in time in the future, we'll have no choice but have to accept it.
I think we will, and I think that life will point us towards that direction sooner rather than later, because the planet sort of shifted, isn't it, from being carnivorous into much more plant-based diets. And I know that America will be the last country on the planet to actually adopt into plant-based diets, but you'd be amazed how popular these diets, these plant-based diets are, and how much is actually impacted on the sale of poultry, sale of cattle, the sale of meats and stuff like that, because it's exactly the same, but the impact on the earth is lessened. It doesn't take much to produce something synthetically. Growing mushrooms is much easier than herding cattle, isn't it? So
yeah,
there's going to be a lot of changes, I think, and I think that a lot of things will shift, but probably way past our time, Gerald, that we actually are, going to, the world's going to experience that. But you think of all the shifts in time that we've seen since we were younger, and the things that have changed. Just take that technology of a mobile phone. Mobile phones didn't come in till really the mid-90s, and nowadays. I'm looking at time travelers with mobile phones back in the 40s, back in the 20s. Yeah, I'm thinking, hey, did this technology really exist in the 40s? Did it really exist in the 20s? And they denied it to us? Did they really have this stuff? Were they capable of having this stuff? And when I see evidence of people actually talking on mobile phones back in 1942, I'm thinking, hang on, did this technology exist at that point and we weren't told about it and we only got told about it 50 years later? Or are there a species of humans that rule and have these mobile phones, and even then that they could use openly because no one knew what they were? Or are we being fooled? Are we not being told about the stuff that people are actually inventing? It's just a crazy thing, isn't it? Because as soon as you see someone in the 1928 film The Circus with Charlie Chaplin on a mobile phone, you're thinking, hang on, are they on a mobile phone? Or is that something else? And that's where we don't know. No one tells us. It's all about speculation. And it's crazy when you see it and you think, is there another explanation for this? Or is it really a phone?
Yeah. Or is it a time traveler that actually has a phone or a device to communicate, but they're dressed up to match the era that they're in?
But who are they talking to?
Right. Yeah. There shouldn't be anybody else with a phone.
No, that's right. A phone's only good if you've got two. If you've only got one phone, it's no use, is it? It's a chocolate teapot. It's just no use at all. So if you've only got one phone, who are you going to be talking to?
Wow.
So that actually tells me that if there is a person in 1942 in Reykjavik talking on a mobile phone, they're talking to somebody else who's got a mobile phone. And that means there's a network of mobile phones that are being used during the Second World War.
Wow. Yeah.
That we don't know nothing about. Yeah. And I don't know. I can imagine that there's technology that we're not told about and things that we're not informed about. But you just look at the advancements in technology that we've had since 1947. Fiber optics, silicon chips. These things changed our world in absolute dynamic form. They gave us computers that changed our world. They gave us communication that changed our world, all in a blink of an eye. In 50 years, we changed from pre-Second World War, where we were probably pulling strings tight and talking down through cans to get communication into high-tech, technical, digital communication, where we can talk on this particular forum directly to each other without any interruption. You know, they couldn't even get a camera shot from France to England in 1970, and we can talk live on a camera shot. So doesn't it make you wonder where this stuff suddenly came from? You know,
right.
Where did it happen? You know, how did we learn to bend light? Because light goes in straight lines, doesn't it? Yes. It just goes straight. It doesn't, you know, it's a beam. So how did we learn to bend light so we could send communication down through it? How did we learn that stuff?
Yeah, look at the timeline between, just say, the telegraph, when we were using the telegraph, to landline telephones, to cell phones, and now, you know, who knows what's next? You know, communicators, to mind speak, where we can just communicate with each other. I mean, it's a progression. It's happened so fast. You know, less than 50 years for some things.
Yeah, well, they said, didn't they, the lunar landing module had less technology in it than the mobile phone. That's what they said. And it landed on the moon. All right. Now we got phones that we can do almost everything on. Everything. It translates language, it does mathematics, takes pictures, and we can talk to anyone anywhere in the world if we have the right code. Yeah.
And yet they say we lost the technology to go back to the moon. So how is that possible?
Well, the moon landings were possible because of a few innovative people that were able to take technology that the Germans had built in 1940s with Van Braun and all those other Nazi rocket technicians that they smuggled out of Germany after the Second World War to actually make something like that happen. That's what happened. The Americans smuggled these people out. These were SS people that were, you know, involved in war crimes and bombing English cities with V2 rockets that they were designing. And that technology went straight into the American space program at NASA. You know, it's incredible what people are forgiven for if it means that they can do something else with it.
I was just making a reference, though. You said that we landed on the moon with technology less than what we have on our cell phones. Well, now we have cell phones and smartphones, but now they say we don't have the technology to go back to the moon. So how is that possible?
Yeah, well, it's not possible, is it? That's a paradox, isn't it, within that whole thing? If we can get to the moon without silicon chips, you know, or with very basic silicon chips, with computers and with plotting, because the hardest thing about going into space travel is plotting routes, isn't it? It's the actual dynamic of being able to calculate the orbits and the thrusts and the power needed, the source of energy. And we can do that, but it takes a lot more effort than what it does when you've got a computer. When you've got a computer, you put it all in and it comes out with the answer. When you haven't got a computer, which we didn't have in the 1960s, supposedly, how could you find those projectional paths that you would need to take? And we were taking those paths to the moon. You're not just going through, you're going to a different orbit. You're going to a different projectile. You know, it's a totally different calculation that was never done. So how could we do that without computers?
Right. Yeah.
So we didn't have them then, did we? Did anyone have a computer in 1967 when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon?
Not that I know of. Not what we consider a computer.
No, nowhere near what we have now in our own laptops. So where did that spring from? Where did that come from? We can get to the moon without that. Why can't we get to the moon without it now?
Yeah, we should. We
should, shouldn't we? Yeah. And some might say that we already have moon bases. We already have bases on Mars. Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of conspiracy theorists out there that say that moon is full of stuff and it's already being mined and already being, you know, designated to different companies and divvied up amongst the rich and the wealthy. And so if that's the case, why aren't we a party to that? Maybe they like us to think we can't get back there because they're already there.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it almost makes you wonder when we talk about stuff like that, like great resets possibly, or when civilizations starting to get to their peak of technology, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, it seems like there's a disaster or a great reset, and it's like a civilization starts over again from the beginning.
Yeah, well, maybe that's something that we might happen to us as a civilization. We don't know yet, do we? Because, I mean, there's lots of things that are still being predicted. And if this guy Noah, who was supposedly a time traveler, who predicted that time travel becomes something that we understand in 2028. Well, it's always easy to say something's going to happen tomorrow, isn't it? It's when you get to tomorrow, that's when it needs to happen. And that's going to be quite interesting to see if it's happened tomorrow within that sort of area. But as long as I'm not seeing time travelers, then I'm not thinking it's going to happen. But when I see time travelers at some of these big events, like the Queen's coronation, like the Queen's funeral, you're seeing time travelers actually there, time tourists that are witnessing events. There's a famous footage of when Brazil won the World Cup in 1958 of someone taking a picture of the guy who won the cup, the captain of Brazil, holding it up. But there's a picture of a mobile phone taking a picture of that. Now, in 1958, where did that come from? Yeah, you can look it up on the internet. Just Google Brazil winning the World Cup in 1958. They beat Czechoslovakia. And then there's this picture of this guy literally at the foreground taking a picture of the guy holding the World Cup up. Now, I don't have any answers to explain why that would be. The only answer I can have is that technology existed long before we knew about it, or there's time travelers that have these communication devices that have been using them throughout time to go backwards and forwards and travel interactively and go and look at these events. And all I would say to people is watch the TV, watch these big events. When there's something happening like the Super Bowl, watch to see who's there, see if there's anybody out of place, because there's likely to be people there on time traveler visas or time travelers tourism, because they know something big is going to happen. And at this moment in time, we wouldn't know, would we? Because everyone's odd. None of us wear the same clothes. We all wear different things. We wouldn't know whether aliens were walking amongst us or time travelers. Even if we knew where to look, we wouldn't know, would we?
Yeah, because you also have the story of the gentleman that says that he traveled back to the Gettysburg Address as a child, and the famous photo is he's right there in front, and he says that's him.
Yeah, he makes that claim, doesn't he? Yeah, but we can't deny it, but we can't actually say that was him. There's a few of these time travelers that have said this. They've said that they've been at certain places at certain times in history to actually witness certain events. The guy who was caught in 2006 by the FBI insider trading on the stock market. Now, that's a story about a guy who suddenly turns up, right, with $800 in his pocket and makes $3.5 million. And the only way he's going to make $3.5 million is by having either insider knowledge or he's from the future. Well, of course, he says he's from the future. He says that he's come and he got carried away, and it became a bit of a buzz for him. And before he realized it, he made $3.5 million, right? Well, look, I sort of get that maybe time travelers are very human like us. But the fact that he disappeared before his trial does sort of create a little bit of sort of, how did that happen? Sort of feeling of, if that's the case, if he is a time traveler, that would explain that he would just disappear. Somebody put up, somebody that was anonymous, a $1 million, what's the name, bond, so bail for him so he could be released. And of course, before his trial, he didn't get to trial because he vanished, and no one's ever seen him ever since. And this is a guy that made £3.25 million on the footsie, which is just mental, isn't it? How many people do you reckon? A bit like the Back to the Future with the almanac. How many people would actually go back in time with an almanac of all the sporting events, make a load of money, and just buzz off back to the future afterwards? Yeah, we don't know, do we? Donald Trump might have done that for all we know. Yeah.
Right. I remember it's a story, obviously. I remember a story where, I don't know if it's Twilight Zone or whatever, but the guy had the technology or patent for oil drill head. And he went back in time because he was going to buy up all this land where all the big oil wells were. Well, when he got back there, all the technology and machinery that he needed to drill oil wasn't there, no matter if he had that oil head to drill through the foundation or the granite. Nothing else was there to help him out. So he still had to live all that time to get back to the place where that technology was still there.
That must have been a real bummer, mustn't it? Can you imagine that? You must have been so disappointed to go all that way and then find that happen. That must be so. Can you imagine being that man? Can you imagine? It's almost like you're falling through time because you think you can do something, and of course, when you get there, there isn't the technology to do it. It's just incredible. I often think about what would we do if we had that knowledge. Would we buy New York City? Would we buy the land, that island? Would we buy, if we had that knowledge, because it became the most expensive real estate in the world, didn't it? What would we buy if we had the chance to go back in time? Would we buy technology? Would we invent something that was going to be mental? Would we write songs that are already written? What would we do?
Yeah. Would you invent Apple computer, or would you buy Apple stock, right at the beginning because it's going to go? But what if the timeline changed? What if that event didn't happen no longer because you went back in time? Or what if your memory fades after so much time and you don't have that information anymore when you go back?
I know. And what if, Gerald, everything that happens is random? Right? So everything that happens is random. So any sporting event is just a random event that could go one of millions of ways. That would be quite interesting, wouldn't it? I mean, the Yankees might have won the title last year, but we don't know, do we? Because everything's random. And it's just that whole thing of, is the past set as the past? And as you come out of it, can we change that history? And if we would we go in there and take out Hitler before the Holocaust? Or would we take out some of the Pol Pot or some of the big dictators of our time? Would we change that? And if we did, would we get a worse outcome? This is the sort of the paradox that time brings, isn't it? Yeah. How do we know what we would be doing would change things for the better?
Yeah. What's the ripple effect by us trying to change something?
Yeah, or having a bit of knowledge that comes in a premonition. You go to sleep tonight and you wake up and you see something happening. You ring up the police and say, look, I know this is crazy, but I've had a premonition and I think that one of these big buildings is going to be blown up. You ring the police, you stop that happening. What's the repercussions of you stopping that happening? Does that mean that someone's going to live that wouldn't have lived normally? Or does it mean that something's going to happen that wasn't going to happen? So where's the repercussions of knowing?
Right.
How
do we know people haven't traveled and told them of events that are going to happen and they just say, you're crazy. Get out of here.
Yeah, well, don't you think that we would have prevented so much happening? This is one of my arguments when I hear all these premonitions. People say, before the towers went down, I had a premonition that they were going to go down. 2 months beforehand, I had this dream and it was going to happen. And I didn't take anything by it. I just thought it was just a dream. But now it's happened. I'm coming out and telling everyone that I've had this premonition. Well, why? Why tell people? Why? Why tell people after the event? Tell them before the event. Stop it happening. And there's nobody out there that does that. I don't know of anyone that's actually done that.
Right.
Have you ever met anyone? You meet a lot of people, Gerald.
No, it's always after the fact.
It's always after the fact, isn't it? So does that mean that there's a law that says that we can't do that? Is there a thing that says with the universal law that if we know something that's going to happen, we can't actually act upon it? We would stop all sorts of disasters and earthquakes and things that happen, like that boat that went into the big ship container that knocked the bridge out. Why don't we know that stuff is going to happen?
Yeah, you would think somebody would. If all this is true and there's time travel or people coming back or having premonitions, like you said, somebody should be saying something, sounding the alarm.
Yeah, they should. They really should. And maybe people do and they get ignored, but surely they would come out and say afterwards, there's so much that doesn't fit for me about certain things. I'm sure there's certain things that are going on that we're not aware of. I'm sure that time is a circle that we can that we can go across, but I'm not sure that we can alter the timeline. Because if we could, we'd have scientists right now working on how we could actually change Hitler. Yeah? Or the Philadelphia experiment. When those two brothers reckon they jumped into the sea and they got taken back in time and forward in time. Do you remember? And they got radiation.
That is my favorite Art Bell interview when they interviewed him, Beale, I believe it was, and Bellick.
Yeah.
Bellick, that's what it was.
That's right. Yeah.
That was a 4-hour interview.
I know, but it's a fascinating subject, isn't it? They reckon they were claiming they're going to make that ship invisible, whereas they reckon that they were making it into a time travel.
Right.
Which one's true? Yeah. And if they were doing that in 1942, what are they doing these days? Some 70, 80 years later.
And I have friends that we've talked to, and I've been on their shows and they've been on ours, that they actually went for the anniversary to Montauk to see if time change or any mist would show up and the ship would appear and then disappear again, or
no, nothing happened.
No, nothing.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Doesn't it make you wonder? I wonder if when we become aware of it, I wonder if it changes everything. I wonder if our human consciousness changes the outcome of situations. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it, to research that, to see if how we think changes stuff. Because if thought could change stuff, we could change stuff by just getting a collective together.
And that was done on Art Bell too. They would have all the listeners and chatters get together at this certain time and try to steer a storm away from a certain area.
Yep. Or that was the Oklahoma storm, wasn't it? When the levees all burst and they wanted to stop them bursting. And also they were bringing down UFOs, weren't they, over the desert? Remember? They were all getting together in groups trying to actually call in the alien visitors. Yeah. So can we do that sort of stuff? Have we got enough power to do that sort of stuff? Is mind a big enough thing that we have, mind power? Is it big enough to change the whole perspective of our life?
And that's always the question. As we raise our vibrations and frequencies and try to reach our higher consciousness, do we have that ability? Can we manifest something with our mind?
Yeah. And can we possibly pick up thought from other civilizations across the universe? Because if thought is actually a wavelength, a vibration or a frequency, surely we'll be able to pick up the thoughts of other civilizations. Some people claim they do, don't they? Some people say they're channelers and they can do that. And again, although I'm very skeptic against channelers, there are people out there that are very good at doing what they do. I always say, bring me something new. Bring me something that I've never, ever known about ever before that's going to change some perspective. Because if you're channeling from a distant planet many light years away, you're not going to be telling someone that, oh, well, if you eat greens, you're going to be okay. You can save the world by eating vegetables. You're not going to say that, are you? You're going to put in there some sort of understanding of technology that can actually make the world carbon free so we don't get global warming. Tell me something like that. Tell me something more profound than, just a prediction about a presidential race, or something that is actually really quite open to debate that anyone could say. So if you're a channeler, let's hear some stuff that we don't know.
It's not going to come from me, I tell you that.
No, well, look, I'm open, right? If anyone out there is a channeler and they can channel thoughts and they, connect to people in different parts of the universe. I hear people talk about the Council of Elders, and I hear about lots of alien species all interact with us in our thoughts and tell us something we don't know. Tell us something that we can actually use in a useful way to actually help us in our quest to become self-sufficient and a very good neighbor of all the other planets that have civilizations in this universe. Because let's face it, we want to be a good neighbor.
So that's your email, right? Or a profiling.
That's my email. Yep, absolutely.
So anybody listening in chat, or anybody that listens to this to the rebroadcast or catch it on the replay, get a hold of Dominic. And if you have channeling abilities or you have a premonition, let's hear about it. You can either get a hold of us at MidwestNightWatchers@gmail.com or get a hold of Dominic himself at auroraprofiling@gmail.com, and let's hear about it.
Yeah, well, I'll be fascinated to hear. I hope I haven't opened up a big can of worms that people are going to send me all their premonitions and predictions and messages from Planet Zog, on the outskirts of the Milky Way. I want real stuff. I want stuff. If people have got real stuff to send me, not stuff we already know, I'm really, really happy to be there with that. I'd champion it. I would spread it around. I would tell people, because it's so important that humanity knows that. But if you're just going to tell me that if I eat my greens, I'll be all right, I don't want to know that.
Right.
I really don't. So make sure it's significant.
There you go. Something we don't already know, something that's going to change mankind or humanity for the better. Let us know. Something we can prevent, something we can do.
Yeah. Premonitions. If you have a premonition, send it to me. I'll be happy to champion you if you actually get that premonition right, or if you actually know something's going to happen. Fantastic. Let me know. I'm happy to publicize you and talk about you. I want the world to have people like those people in the fore. I want people who are good at doing stuff to be the ones that we look to. I don't want people leading us through money. I want people who know stuff.
All right. Well, we've been on for an hour and a half, and I think this is a good place to end this thing, and we'll have you back some other time, and we'll have to find out if anybody sent you anything on premonitions or anything.
Yeah, and in the meantime, if they want to know anything about energy frequencies or auras, same email, get in touch. If they're interested in aura profiling, which is the most detailed way to have a reading about you or a child or a parent or a dog, or if you've got a haunted house you want me to look at, because I look at a haunted house through video, and I can actually tell people where the energy is, where they can cleanse that place. Let me know. I do so much more. And if you want to read any of my books, I'm on Amazon, like most of us are these days, Gerald.
And that's your website there, right? I got that right, I hope.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, DominicZenden.info. That's me.
Yeah. So if they want to get a hold of you or schedule anything, they can either email you or go to this website. And
come through the email. It's a lot quicker. It's a lot less formal, a lot nicer, and I always get the emails. So come on the email. I'm quite happy to talk to people if they want to understand things. One of my things is, Gerald, I make time for everything. So
Yeah, I
always
appreciate you
fun.
making time for us. I mean, we've enjoyed this. This is our second show together, and both shows
Yeah.
have this been fantastic.
Well, thank you. I hope the listeners have enjoyed it as well. I hope they've got something out of it, and I hope that they've given something to think about in the coming weeks.
So go. So you're a busy guy. You're on a lot of shows. So do you have anything coming up that you might want to promote just real quick before we take off?
Oh gosh, well, I do a lot of Andy Decodes on there on Friday, 26th of April. Do that. I've got a little list over here. Hang on, let's have a quick look through my list.
Right.
So I get so many. I'm on Something Freaky with Tommy at some point. I've got Michaela, who I'm on a podcast with as well, talking about auras and color frequencies and all those bits. That's just in the week ahead. So, I mean, I always publicize any podcast I'm going to do on Facebook. So if you come onto my Facebook at Dominic J. Zenden, you will see whose show I'm on, who I'm talking to, and what the topic is. Just like with Gerald tonight on, what is it called now? We're piercing the veil, aren't we?
Watchers.
Yeah, Western Night Watchers. So we're doing things like this, and maybe one day, Gerald, you can come on to my podcast, which I'm just starting up, which is called The Soul Cages. It's brand new. Yeah, it's going to be talking about the soul and what the soul is, and how culture and how myths and how things have talked about the soul. It's not going to be about anything else, just about how we see the soul. So we're going to get lots of eminent people across the world coming on talking about the soul, because we're still not any of the wiser, but people have opinions about it. So that's going to be The Soul Cages by Dominic Zenden.
I would love to come on your show and talk about that and be a part of it. I don't know if I stand up or have the certificates that maybe some of your other guests might have, but I definitely have opinions and theories.
Sure, you're a human being, and not only that, you have a lot of knowledge there, and a lot of you and Jane. You're more than welcome to come on and talk about how you've come to believe in what you believe in, because that's really what it's about. It's about personal beliefs and what we come to understand. And people don't get to be old like us, Gerald, and actually not have personal beliefs, do we? We
Right.
sort of grow those beliefs, and I want to hear them. Because I think that if we can start conversations about that sort of stuff, it's going to help people understand it, and they're going to grow their own conversations through it. So that's part of the objective of doing the Soul Cages. So
tell us again what the show is, the title of it, because people are asking in chat. They didn't quite catch it.
It's going to be called Soul Cages. It's going to be a podcast that's going to be every week, and it's going to be on Facebook, DominicJZenden.com, or you're going to be able to find it on Spotify and all the other podcast providers that are out there. It's probably going to go on about 12 different podcast providers, and I've got quite a few really good guests lined up just to start the ball rolling with what people believe the soul is. Because if I ask one person, that's not objective. I want to ask 20, 30 people what they believe the soul is, and most people have different answers. And again, it's going to be a great show, and I think we're going to be very interested in the outcomes of some of the interviews.
Yeah, the more sampling you can get, the better objective opinion you can have, or try to draw your own conclusion. The more information you have to grab from.
Yeah, what I want to do is just open the conversation up for people to be able to talk. And I love interviewing people. I'm a very good interviewer when it comes to talking to people objectively. And I want to bring the best out. And I want to start the debate where we can start to understand there may be quite a lot going on in this subject, but it's not about anything else. It's about the soul and what we actually feel from that. Because if I'm right, we are primarily soul energy. And that's what draws people together. That's what brings groups of people together. That's what's brought your community together. Like-minded frequency and vibration that wants to explore. Now, what a better way of introducing a podcast than to say, let's get everyone in the world that are interested in exploring what the soul is. Let's find out what it is. Let's discover it. Let's find out how it vibrates, how it stores, what records it's got, whether it's actually a Keysic or whether it's actually just there and there's just a tape recorder, what it's made out of, how it actually works. Is it transferable? Are there soulless people out there? Are there people that don't have souls? Will we know that? Will we be able to see the effect on their aura? All that sort of stuff. That's what we're going to get into.
There you go. That sounds awesome. Yeah, I can't wait.
No, that's good. We'll have you on, Gerald. And if Jane wants to come on, she can come on. And it's great to get that cross-section of community talking about this stuff because we need to talk about it. That's how we discover new stuff. New knowledge is of a premium. It's so good to have new knowledge. I don't want all the old stuff. I want the new knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You never know what piece of information somebody might have, whether it's a download or a higher consciousness telling them, or they've just had that experience. Maybe they've had their astral travel or their soul leave their body and come back.
Absolutely. And when you start to actually jam with people and really talk to people, you get their experiences and you get their personal beliefs and their personal structures in their life that they've really thought about. And when we talk about stuff, it creates new stuff. That's why it's so important not to use the forums of podcasts just to talk about nonsense, but to talk about some of the stuff that really affects humanity. And the more we can get that, the more we can share knowledge with everyone, the more awareness we're going to have, the better life is going to be on this planet.
Right. And we've done probably over 100 shows, including ours and other interviews we've done on other shows, and just chats with people online. And every once in a while, I'll say something out of my experience or whatever. And all of a sudden people say, why haven't you said that before? It says, because I didn't think it was relevant at the time. And I just remembered all of a sudden it became relevant to this story that we're talking about. Yeah. So there's always something that drums it up in your experience that somebody else might not have ever heard, or you forgot about that experience that never made sense before, and now all of a sudden it does.
Yeah. And those little pieces of information that come in like that actually are missing jigsaw puzzle pieces, because we ain't got the whole jigsaw at this moment in time, so we can't see the big picture. And we need everyone's experiences and everyone's knowledge and everyone's thoughts, even if it's just something you've thought about or something that you've considered. We need those things in, because they're the things that allow us to go to that new frontier, which is understanding spirituality and our purpose. If without them, we don't get there. We don't get there at all. We all count in this.
Yeah, that's why I like talking to guests and having you on and other people in different fields, because all of a sudden something comes to me and I might say something and it'll spark something in you, or you'll say something, it'll spark something in me, or it'll bring the whole pictures a little bit closer, more in focus for me to see, to explain it to me. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's the importance of communication and conversation. So important. That's why anybody that does a podcast, they need to be looking at the new knowledge, not repeating the old knowledge. We know the old knowledge. We know all the old teachings. We have to progress. We have to go forward, and we have to be able to adapt away from stuff that may well be misleading or wrong within the way it's been taught for whatever reason. And it's that whole thing about doctrine. We need to go into areas where we question it so we can understand it and we can express it, and then the next generation can take it further. But while we're being lost in people making up stuff that suits their purpose, what is the point? That's a bit like telling fairy stories around a campfire just to be entertaining. Let's be more than that. Let's be much more proactive in what we look at.
Yes, I agree.
Good.
Well, Dominic, this has been awesome. Fantastic show. Thank you for coming on and spending time with us.
It's okay. My pleasure. Been nice. So again, send my regards to Jane, and I look forward to seeing her on my show in a few weeks' time, and yourself. And again, if anyone wants to talk to me, please feel free. just come on Facebook or email me, and I'm happy to respond. Not always as quick as I possibly could, but I will respond. I will get to every one of you if you've got something to ask.
All right. Well, thank you for being here, and don't go away. Stay there for a moment, and I'll just say goodbye to our people in chat. Or thank you everybody for coming. I've seen you guys all in chat. You've been making good comments. I would have brought them up, but I couldn't tell if they were questions or anything that you wanted to be up on screen. Nobody put anything in all capitals, but I did read everything that was coming up. So thank you for being here. Thank you for following us and coming here to join us with Dominic. He's just been fantastic, and it's been enlightening to me. I hope it has been for you. And in saying that, we'll just say goodbye, and everybody, love and peace. Do something kind for somebody, and do something kind for yourself, because you got to love yourself to start spreading the word out. So in saying that, we love you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.